Okay, everybody, welcome back to this event, our World Ocean Week Suriname. We have an afternoon full of very interesting talks now related to marine mammals. To moderate this session, which is called Voices from the Ocean, a collaborative science for marine mammal conservation in Suriname, I have Dr. Nathalie Castelblanco Martinez. She's a senior researcher at EcoSur in Mexico. Dr. Nathalie is a marine ecologist with over 15 years of experience in conservation of marine mammals, seagrasses, mangroves in Latin America. Based at EcoSur in Mexico, she is recognized for her research on the Greater Caribbean manatee and her work combining science, policy, and community engagement. Nathalie is also a strong advocate for including local and indigenous knowledge in conservation efforts across the region. Thank you, Nathalie.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So I have the pleasure to present my colleagues here in this section of the afternoon. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. And the first one is José Truda Palazzo. She's from the Humpback Whale Institute from Brazil, and he is a pioneer in whale conservation in Latin America with over 40 years of experience. He played a key role in the recovery of humpback whales in Brazil and represented the country at the International Whaling Commission. Today, he continues to advocate for marine conservation and sustainable ocean policies through his work at the Humpback Whale Institute. So, welcome very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'd like to, first of all, thank the Green Heritage Fund Suriname and BGP for organizing this event and for inviting me. And I'll talk very briefly from my perspective on whale science and conservation policy and what we can do together based on some of the experiences I had in this 40 years of work in the area. And I wanted to start this quick talk by putting some children on the screen because, as we've talked this morning, they're the future. And we need younger people doing the work that we've been carrying on over the last few decades. It's their work that we're wrecking with our reckless exploitation of natural resources, and it's for them that we should be working. As you all know, whales and dolphins have become real ambassadors for the ocean, and you all know about the global crisis of whaling in the past few decades when the great whales were brought almost to extinction by commercial whaling. And this was also the first big international environmental movement. It mobilized people all across the globe, and it was the mobilization of people around the planet that made successive governments stop whaling and then changed the nature of the International Whaling Commission, where whaling quotas were decided to declare a moratorium on whaling. And so whales and dolphins, which are much closer to our coast and to our heart in many ways, have become true ambassadors and symbols for ocean conservation. No, I don't want software update? No, thanks. Well, what we've been learning is that whales and dolphins have become both an indicator of ocean and coastal health. Many of the studies that are done on this species help us understand how healthy our marine or coastal ecosystems are, but they're also a key element of marine and coastal health. We've been talking a lot about climate change lately. We're going up to COP30 in Belém in the Brazilian Amazon. And what we've been learning is that biodiversity is a major component of our fight to stop climate change. It's not only other processes, but the protection of marine biodiversity is key if we want to reverse climate change. We know that the oceans are a big sink for carbon. What we didn't know, and we're learning by modern research, is that a great part of the ocean function in absorbing carbon is due to the biomass that's in it and the ecological processes that happen in the ocean. So by bad uses of the ocean like overfishing and whaling, which removed more than 3 million whales from the planet's ocean over the last century, we have reduced the capacity of the ocean to absorb carbon, and therefore reduced the capacity of the ocean to help us in our fight against climate change. This is just an example. Whales are a big component of the carbon sink. They fertilize the upper layers of the ocean and provide for an increase in phytoplankton and productivity for fisheries. They also take carbon down to the depths of the ocean when they die, and it will take probably many centuries to come back to the atmosphere because of the deep ocean circulation, which is very slow. So whales and lots of other marine species contribute to our fight against climate change, and to several other ecosystem services. We have been talking about the importance of them for climate change, but also for fisheries, for the generation of jobs and income through ecotourism, for cultural appreciation of nature. So from all these different ecosystem services that we talk about, several of them are provided by whales and dolphins. And this has to be incorporated in the way that we understand these animals. Now, how do we know that? We know that because of scientific research. It is the systematic study of these animals that provides the information needed for us to understand their role on the planet and their role in our own survival. These are some of the activities that the Humpback Whale Institute does in Brazil. We do photo identification, study their behavior using drones, through acoustics, and also take biopsy samples of tissue so we can not only understand their genetics, but also figure out any contaminants that might be affecting these animals. Of course, this all takes a lot of money to be done. We were talking about the means to do stuff like that. And for the last 27 years, this work has been sponsored for the Humpback Whale Institute in Brazil by Petrobras, our National Oil Institute. Now, this is relevant not because I want to do an advertisement for Petrobras, but because when we're talking about energy companies, we usually think that their role in the energy transition to a more friendly way of living has to do only with the generation of energy. But companies like Petrobras, which is probably the major funder internationally of marine biodiversity conservation, can contribute to mitigate climate change by supporting biodiversity research and conservation. I want to say that again. It is the biodiversity of the ocean that helps the ocean absorb carbon. And therefore, big corporations that help protect marine biodiversity are helping us to avert climate change. It's part of the just energy transition that many people talk about. And why is science important? Well, because it lets us track what's happening in the ocean. In the case of humpback whales in Brazil, when we started working with them, there were probably about 500 to 1,000 surviving animals from the whaling era. Now, through the aerial censuses that we do and cover about 4,000 kilometers every 2 years, and the photo ID data, we estimate something near 35,000 animals, which is quite a big contribution to the recovery of ocean biomass. And we use that data for practical purposes in terms of conservation. We're not a research institution per se. For us, science is a tool to affect conservation. And this is a map of the coast of Brazil, especially the northeast. And this bigger area with the blue markings is the Abrolhos Reef Bank, the largest coral reef bank in the South Atlantic, and it's also the largest concentration of humpback whales that we have in Brazil. You will see on the detailed map on the right a red line. That red line is a shipping lane that we were able to move from the higher concentration of whales to an area of lesser concentration to try avoid incidents. And that was done because of the acquisition of scientific data about the distribution of the animals and also working very closely with the industry, both the paper mill industry and the shipping company that transports their products. And it's all been done voluntarily without the need of federal regulations or anything like that. And of course, we need to take it to another level. We need to make sure, as someone was saying this morning about the sea turtles, that science influences public policy, both at the national level and at the international level. The Humpback Whale Institute is an observer at the International Whaling Commission. We have stopped commercial whaling, mostly all around the world, but there's a couple of countries still killing them. And the Commission also has great responsibility in helping to foster international collaboration on research. We're still trying to get a South Atlantic whale sanctuary established so we can promote cooperation in research and non-lethal use of whales through whale watching, and that hasn't been approved by one vote at the last plenary meeting of the Commission. Now, which country near here wasn't present or voting? Can you guess? It's a it's a member of the Commission that hasn't been around for a while. It's Suriname. And many other countries were not present too, so we're still working on that. Now, why that happens? Why countries don't show up at international meetings or do their part in helping us do proper international policy for marine conservation? Because we didn't have enough political mass in the country talking about this problem. So the science that we do and that wants to help inform public policy should also be used to inform the public and educate the public and raise awareness about the importance of the ocean and the importance about protecting marine biodiversity. So at the Institute we have several interpretive centers where we give talks to the community in general. We promote cultural events like a yearly whale festival in the different coastal cities that we work with. And we also help promote whale watching. We do capacity building workshops, and we help promote this activity to generate jobs and income in the community. Yesterday we had the privilege of going out with Captain Moon and his whale watching partners doing dolphin watching in the estuary. That is an international class operation. So whoever, Monique, that helped them get that started certainly merits congratulations. It's a world-class operation that's happening here. The animals are quite comfortable around the boats, and that's the kind of thing that we're trying to promote. Whale watching and dolphin watching motivates people to protect the ocean. It's not just for the money, it's also for the awareness that it generates. So we need Suriname to get back. We need Suriname at the International Whaling Commission and at other international treaties. And why am I not talking about dolphins here and Antarctica, which it's probably so far away from the daily concerns of the Surinamese? Well, basically because there wouldn't be any tropical forests, there wouldn't be any hydrological cycle in the Amazonian region without Antarctica. It is still the greatest regulator of global climate. And not only we need to ensure that its ice caps continue to be there, but we also need to work for the marine biodiversity that Antarctica generates continues to exist. That little tiny shrimp that's on the picture on the right side, krill, is what the thousands and thousands of whales in the southern hemisphere feed on. Also several other species of marine mammals, also several species of fish, and all these creatures, again, contribute to generate a healthy ocean. There's now a whole lot of new marine protected areas being promoted in Antarctica, and also there is a growing fishery for krill, thousands and thousands of tons being taken from the Antarctic every summer. There was a regulation regime. That regime collapsed last year because the convention that is supposed to protect Antarctic marine living resources couldn't get an agreement on the regulation of the krill fishery. Well, Suriname doesn't have an Antarctic base, probably won't have it for a while, but Suriname has a stake at what happens in Antarctica. Suriname has the right to an opinion and to participate in decisions like the ones that affect the Antarctic. There's now a new treaty on biodiversity beyond national jurisdictions. We need the voice of Suriname. We need the voice of all the global South countries, which are not usually represented in most of these negotiations that affect us globally. And again, the reason we need to be there is because of people like Lana, who went with us yesterday to see the dolphins and wants to be a marine biologist and wants to have a say in the science of our country, in the future of our country, and the future of our planet. We must mobilize to make sure that research happens, that it informs policy, and that it informs the public about the importance of protecting our shared marine heritage. That was all for now. Thank you. These are my contacts for those willing to extend this conversation further from today. And I also brought a few booklets in Portuguese and English about the work that we do, and a few key rings. There's a lot of plastic there. It wasn't me who did that, but anyways, thank you very much for inviting me. Thanks.
Thank you, Jose. Very interesting. We let the questions for the end. Okay. And now I have the pleasure to welcome Thomas Willems. Dr. Willems, he is a fisheries biologist based in Suriname. For the last 10 years, he has been working as a marine and fisheries researcher for various organizations, including the FAO, the World Wildlife Fund, the Conservation International, and others. He is currently the coordinator of the Research and Statistics Divisions of the Suriname Fisheries Department, and he has been providing technical support to the Suriname government on fishing gear and bycatch reduction, fisheries data collection and data analysis, and sustainable fisheries management in general. Thomas has a PhD in marine science and a master in marine biodiversity and conservation, both from the University of Ghent in Belgium. So welcome to the presentation.
Did you manage to get the slide? All right, good afternoon. Thank you for introduction, and thank you for the opportunity, Green Heritage Fund and BGP, to participate in this seminar. I have a small contribution to make. I want to talk about my work at the Fisheries Department of Suriname and how that links to conservation of marine biodiversity, including marine mammals. And I hope how we can improve these links in the future as we have our discussion this afternoon. So I've just prepared a few slides and some general introduction about how Suriname government collects data and monitors the fisheries, because fishing remains one of the main activities in the marine environment in Suriname. Although there's a lot of talking about the oil and gas sector coming up, if you ever went at sea or in the coast in Suriname, the main economic activity that's happening there is fisheries. And therefore also the impacts on marine biodiversity at the moment are still largely due to fishing activities. So just to give you some background on what we do at the Fisheries Department, I'm working with the what we call the Research and Statistics Unit. Our main focus really is, in the first place, collecting data on the fishing sector. What do Surinamese fisheries remove from the ocean? What is being landed? We have various approaches to that. Here you can see a schematic on how we collect data from the industrial fleet. Suriname has quite a large, I would say, industrial fleet. Large is relative if we compare to countries like Brazil, but I mean, we're talking about maybe 200 vessels, which are based in different categories. They send their data to us. We do quality control. We compile this data, and ultimately we produce statistics with the aim to basically inform the government and the policymakers on what is happening with the fish stocks. Are they going up or down? And also this data is being used to do some research into the stocks and to make sure that they are fished sustainably. We have a different approach for the small-scale fisheries, where the data collectors from the ministry are in the field collecting the data from the fishers, because we don't expect the small-scale fishers to fill in Excel forms and send them to us, but rather the staff is in the field to collect data from these vessels, which we then use to make estimations of the catch of these vessels as well. Finally, we also collect data on the biology on the species, which is again important for research to run some models on how these stocks are doing. And here you can see some of our staff collecting lengths of fish. There you can see one of our main target species, which is the Akupa weakfish or the bambang. So let's say our key focus is on fisheries catches. But increasingly, we also try to focus our monitoring on the side effects that fishing has on the marine environment. And one of the most important aspects there is the bycatch, which occurs when the fishing gear interacts with non-target species. We usually group them as ETP species, endangered, threatened, or protected species. And marine mammals are definitely in that group of ETP species, which are not targeted by the fishermen. They have no economic value, and they're also prohibited to catch, especially in the case of marine mammals and marine turtles. I must say they are prohibited to land because the catching indeed happens accidentally. So we have some programs in place to monitor this bycatch. You can see some pictures of our observer program, where staff from the department goes on board on commercial fishing trips and records what is being captured, not only the target fish, but also bycatch marine mammals in case it happens, or sea turtles, but also rays, sharks, and other vulnerable species. This is one way of doing it. In the artisanal, the small-scale fishery, we have a different approach where we work directly with the fishers, and we have trained a number of fishermen to record their catch. We call that our self-sampling program, where they fill in a form for every fishing trip, so we get an idea on the interactions that these fishermen have as well. Here you can see an example of this form that they use, which currently we also try to implement in the industrial fleet. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the importance of this monitoring, not only of the target catch, the economic value and the fish stocks, but also of the bycatch. In the first place, it's important for the sector to have these programs in place because, as you might know, a lot of the fisheries catch from Suriname is being exported 80 to 90% of all the catches from fleets in Suriname is going for export, even from the small-scale fishermen. So it is important to comply with international standards. And there are a number of laws, rules, and regulations that we have to comply with. Notably, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, which is now coming into force in the United States, and which requires countries exporting their fishery products to the US, including Suriname, to have certain monitoring in place to make sure that your fisheries are not damaging the population of marine mammals in a significant manner. So that's the first important reason for the fishing sector itself to monitoring this. On the other hand, the marine environment in Suriname is very much understudied, I would say. So we don't have a good idea on where and when do these species occur and when do the interactions occur with the fishing gear. Because, I mean, it looks like a homogeneous environment, the sea, at least from the surface, but below the water there is a lot happening. And we don't fully understand why whales and dolphins occur in certain areas at certain time of the year, why they interact with fishing vessels, why they end up in fishing nets. So by having these programs in place over a longer time period, we can compile information on where are hotspots of interactions, and this information we can then use to again advise the policymakers, for example, to install marine protected areas, maybe in a seasonal manner, to make sure that these interactions are minimized and we get a better protection. So these two main reasons: information gathering to guide policy, and on the other hand, compliance with the export markets. Yeah, and then finally, some final remarks I wanted to make is that fisheries are a very important activity, as I said, in the Suriname marine environment. They are definitely maybe the most important threat to marine biodiversity currently in Surinamese waters. So we need more information on those threats, and we also need to provide good information to the policymakers, because the fishing sector is an important economic activity for Suriname, but it needs to be balanced with this protection of the marine environment. And I think that's the main challenge that we have. I put here a picture of one of the stakeholder meetings that we have. There are a lot of stakeholders involved in the fishing sector, private sector partners, small and large-scale fishermen, various authorities with different tasks, and everybody has sort of to come to an agreement on how to approach fisheries management. And I think increasingly we have to recognize the importance of the rich marine biodiversity of Suriname. We have to document it better in order to protect it better. That's my short contribution here, and I'm happy to answer more during our discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, the questions are going to be at the end, so take note of your questions. The next presenter doesn't need introduction, but I will do it. Monique Poole is finalist in the CNN Hero 2015 Awards, founded the Green Heritage Fund Suriname in 2005 after agreeing to foster and rehabilitate an orphaned sloth from the local animal shelter. Monique soon discovered Suriname's needs for rescue, rehabilitation, and relocation of all Sinartra species, sloths, anteaters, and armadillos, due to deforestation and expansion of the capital city of Paramaribo. Outside her full-time job as a translator and interpreter, Suriname's resident sloth lady worked as an environmental activist caring for and relocating Sinartra, researching dolphins, and providing community education about conservation, sustainable development, and climate change to ensure a green, clean, and healthy future for Suriname. For the past 15 years, Monique has been studying the species she works with, from sloth and anteaters to dolphins and manatees, and now has expert knowledge of them all. So, welcome.
Thank you, Natalie. I wish that I had expert knowledge of these animals, because they remain a mystery to us forever, I think. So, I normally begin my presentations by sort of thanking. We are here in Paramaribo, on land that was originally inhabited by Carib and Lokono people, and they never voluntarily ceded this land. My ancestors also came to this land, most of them involuntarily, and or came under false pretenses. They were, yeah. So this is also the very beautiful coastal ecosystem of Suriname, where we are, and it has a rich, unique biodiversity. And it is bordered by the North Brazil large marine ecosystem. And thanks to this nature, we can all live in this coastal area. So I would like to say thanks to that. I like to start my presentations always like this, because we have to thank nature, but also the people who came before us for a healthy life. So with our work, we contribute to these sustainable development goals, and that's, I'm not going to go into that, but basically we have to preserve their environment, not just for sloths, but also for other animals that live with us here. So I'm just going to quickly go to what is the context of Suriname. So how does nature protection in Suriname work with regard to Satalia? What types of studies have we done? What are the threats and the habitat? And I'll quickly, briefly go into other dolphins and whales. So Suriname is part of the Guyana Shield, which is a very old, stable geological formation. We don't have any earthquakes here. It's a very flat land and beautiful forest and a beautiful marine ecosystem. Often when people come together in big meetings talking about the Amazon, they forget to talk about the coast, because the coast and the Amazon's influence on our coast is enormous. And so that's why I want to give this context. The outflow of the Amazon is around 200,000 square meters or tons per minute, and it brings a lot of sediment, and up to 40 kilometers from our coast, that influences the color of the Surinamese waters. So when we talk about protecting the Amazon, we also have to talk about protecting the North Brazil large marine ecosystem that is part of this whole ecosystem. And there's actually beautiful studies from Brazilian researcher about the interaction between the ocean and the forests. And without the ocean, we wouldn't have the same type of forest that we have here. So the dolphin that we've been working with in a citizen science monitoring program is called the Guyana dolphin, Sotalia guyanensis. It's a separate species from the riverine species, which is Sotalia fluviatilis. It's a beautiful dolphin, and for everybody who was with us yesterday, you could have seen it live. They were spectacular. I think they knew there were some laughing conservationists on the boat, and they really showed off. But we have some problems with protections, which have to do with mandates. Although the protection of the species falls under one ministry, it's the fisheries department that is actually responsible for management plans, etc., with regard to the species. So, for example, we've done some necropsies in the past where we've had some uncomfortable situations with a dolphin that had just been unfrozen. And once you do that, I mean, we're talking here about a huge animal, then you cannot tell us like, oh, we don't have fuel today, so we cannot transport your dolphin to the location of the fisheries department where we do the necropsy. So there are some issues there where we need to collaborate better between the different ministries, but also our organization work very well with the Ministry of Fisheries to know also our limitations, I think, so that we can better work together. There were some studies done of this species, and very specifically in the Suriname River estuary. That's where we work. We've been doing this since 2007. We started earlier, but since 2007 we put into place a certain protocol where we collect data on these animals. And we have shared this data through different platforms. Not all of it, because it's so much and we haven't put everything in the computer yet, but that will be my life's work. But if I find a student to help me, that will be also great. So the place where we've been doing this, and I have to say we do this only on a Sunday morning. We normally would go every Sunday morning out and collect data, because everybody who was working with us had a job. So these were people who were doing this voluntarily. They were paying, all of them, for the transportation so that we could continue this for a long time. So it was a very sustainable program. Unfortunately, the boat has become more expensive, so just having enough researchers on board, whoever, voluntary citizen science researchers, is no longer enough to pay the boat. So as I said, this is our study area, and this is the species we work with. Yesterday was special, but as you see, they can be special also on other days. In 2015, my data was used, but also new data was generated by Ms. Liu, and she did a kernel density map for this estuary, and I don't think we even went to this side of the river when we were there yesterday, but this is, all this data, as I think has been said before, research is a tool for conservation. So it's just to show they are there, and they are there all the time. With some of the data that we have, we also have specific types of behaviors that we can probably, we can say, oh, they feed here more often and they rest in other places. So it's important to know that for mitigation measures, if we get this offshore industry going, it means more boats and probably more ports as well. So we need to have this data to help protect their environment. We have to protect where they live. Through the years, we've been collecting fin data of these animals because their fins are very typical. They are really specific for each individual. And we've tried the different software that's out there. I think I had a discussion with Morgana about that. But in the end, the person I worked with, she preferred to do this with the fins, and that is to make them completely black, and then you can see very well the differences in each fin. And we have at least identified, I think the last time she told me it was 81 individuals. And so we actually know them. And when we were talking about sea turtles, we also need to share this data more, I think, with the broader public. Even though people are very aware of the dolphins, probably more than the sea turtles, because it's so easy to see them. But we need people to become so involved that they will start giving them names. So I think we will plan in the coming time to start giving these animals names chosen by the public based on the fins. That's normally how it works, I think. So what other data do we collect? We collect, of course, you always collect the date, and then time, the GPS, the pH, salinity, temperature. So a lot of environmental data to see if there's a relationship between these specific parameters and the presence or absence of these animals. And so we have almost like 20 years of data from this estuary. Of course, we all know we have a beautiful coast. This is somewhere more to the east of our country, Coroni. It's a wild coast, as some of you've heard, not because we're such wild people in Suriname, but because it's moving all the time, it's shifting, and it's never the same. Yesterday we were at Rust and Werk, and behind Rust and Werk you can find this particular beach. Sometimes it's a beach with sand, and I think Karel came to me to explain to me that because this is what our coast looks like. This is how accessible it is. This is Shilton. We were doing a mapping of the coast, of the whole coast, and we were taking samples, and from time to time we would take a kayak. Actually, Shilton would take a kayak and try to get to the coast, and then even still got stuck in a kayak. And this is how difficult it is to study this coast. And also, because we're now going to do environmental sensitivity index mapping, that those are maps specifically used for in case an oil spill happens. And a lot of you can think, oh yeah, the offshore is coming, so we need to have those maps. No, we need to have those maps always, because when a ship comes along with oil and it capsizes, it has nothing to do with the offshore industry. This is just normal planning, normal disaster planning that we should be doing all the time in Suriname. As I said, we're part of this North Brazil large marine ecosystem, and we've had the pleasure of doing 2 surveys in 2021. One where we tried to get more data, and if you look, okay, so you can't see my, but in the right corner, that is a big gap. We don't have data there. And so we are planning surveys now to gather more data about that area. It's called the Demerara Plateau. It has a very steep slope, and that is also where we found a new species for Suriname, a beaked whale, a Gervais beaked whale. So there's still a lot we don't know. So Thomas didn't tell you that he's also
at your speech. So do you also do unique types of sea life if you find them, or do you leave them alone because they're exotic?
Not sure if I understand your question well.
Okay.
I mean, for example, the catch that's reported to us by the fishing sector, we try to have it reported at the species level as much as possible. Sometimes, in a commercial context, species are mixed together, which are very similar and have the same market value. So then we can't really expect from the fishermen to identify everything to a species level. When our own staff, like the on a picture, when they go at sea, they identify everything to a level of the species, and we have some training that we do with them. There are good books available for their identification, but you have to be careful because a lot of the fish are very similar. If you go on a fishing trawler, you might get up to 100 different species of fish because there's a lot of diversity. We do try to record if there are new species that we haven't seen before. We try to document it, and for example, what we have seen increasingly presence of the lionfish in Suriname. The species that you might know is an introduced species from Southeast Asia. It's a very beautiful fish, but it's a problematic fish because it doesn't have natural enemies in the Caribbean Sea and in the North Brazil Shelf. And it seems that it is expanding and it's a threat for the environment. And we are now increasingly seeing it from our own observers, but also from fishermen who capture it. They send a picture, they say, I've caught a beautiful fish with this problematic fish. So we try to document the diversity as much as possible. If that answers your question.
Yeah, that was the answer to my question. Here you go.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other question? Well, I have one for...
Yes, thank you very much, all of your speakers. I have a question for you. You said that some countries didn't attend the International Whaling Commission meetings. What they have to do to attend these meetings? What is the process?
To join the International Whaling Commission or any other treaty, the country has to deposit a diplomatic note with the depositary government. In this case, it's the United States. In the case of Suriname, for instance, it's been a member for whatever many years. It just hasn't been participating in the meetings. For the new treaty on the conservation of biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction, for instance, it's right now in the process of ratification by the countries. It takes another 11 countries, I think, to enter into force. When all this, I think it's 60-something countries that need to sign onto it, and then it will become international law. So in many of these conventions, countries have to pay a yearly quota, which in the case of the Whaling Commission, for instance, it's calculated according to the country's capacity to pay. There's a calculation that's made. Developing countries pay much less than developed countries, and that's basically how it works.
Thank you. More questions? Okay.
I was waiting for other people to say it.
Go ahead.
How far out do you have to go in Suriname, in the ocean, to see whales? You know, if you're talking about, yeah, let's go, or, what is kind of average?
I know that Thomas collaborated on a paper about the humpback whale that was seen quite far inshore. You can...
So one thing to know about the Suriname Ocean is that it's very shallow. So Monique has been talking about the North Brazil Shelf area. Suriname is part of that, which means that the sea, when you go out at sea in Suriname, you have to go very far from the coast before you reach certain depth. So if you are 50 kilometers out of the coast, the water depth is still only like 30, 40 meters maximum. So you have to go, on average, let's say 100 kilometers from the coast, where there is what we call the shelf break, and there suddenly it goes very deep. It goes really from 100 meters, very short distance, it goes down to 2,000, 3,000 meters. And in that whole area, the shallow area, you won't find a lot of whales, because they like, and my colleague here will know better, but they don't like the shallow water in general. One exception is indeed the observation of this humpback whale with a calf that some fishermen saw a few years ago, where the hypothesis was raised that maybe the shallow waters are important for these species to raise their young in the sheltered environment. But in general, whales don't like the shallow waters. Dolphins like it, but not the whales. So in Suriname, for the chances to see big whales, you have to go far away from the coast.
Yeah, just to add something, humpback whales have been the species which has recovered most quickly from the times of whaling. So it wouldn't surprise me if at some point Suriname would be starting to see an aggregation of breeding humpback whales along its coast. So it might be worthwhile thinking about some sort of regular surveys in the same breeding season that the rest of the Caribbean has. I was looking at Demerara Plateau and other areas. I mean, the humpback whale concentration that I showed you in the Abrolhos Bank, the depth there is from 20 to 40, 50 meters. So when they're calving, they do like shallower water. I mean, talking about humpback specifically. So it's certainly worth keeping an eye on them.
Yeah, and so this particular sighting was a humpback whale with a calf.
Yeah.
I have those. Okay. Yeah. If you're talking about increasing the awareness overall in the school system, is it already included in the books about nature and whatever about the dolphins and the whales? Are we already at that point?
No, we are not, but we maybe this is a nice place to share this. We signed an agreement with the Center for I don't know how to translate this in English, but it's a center that takes care of schooling that doesn't fit within the curriculum. And so they go into schools with extracurricular things. Like, for example, if I have lessons about plastics, I can go to them and say, hey, we have these lessons about plastic. Will you go into the schools and teach the children? And so we just signed a MOU with them. And so we hope that through this MOU, we will be able to get, even if it's not in the books, get it into the classes and into the children's awareness. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question as well. I want to hear your advice to young people that want to become marine biologists or scientists and work with marine mammals. What would you tell them to seek in terms of organizations, education, etc.?
Yeah, so I would say, well, become a volunteer with us. We have this dolphin program that's been running for so many years, 20 years. Our organization is this year, we are 20 years old. Our program is running since 2007. And the only thing we say, if young people who are minors want to join, is that they join together with their parents. And it's very interesting. We have one volunteer that joined when she was a teenager. She's now almost finished her veterinary doctor's degree, but her mother remained a volunteer with us. So I would say, if you're interested, if you're a minor, well, convince your father or mother to come, and we will teach you what to do, and that will help. There was a very nice online session yesterday about building your CV already for if you want to go into other classes. And we will have an amazing presentation tomorrow from somebody who hasn't studied marine science at all, but is a mathematician, which is Rocio, but she counts whales. That is what her passion is. So you all do not necessarily have to study, as long as you know what you want. I'm a linguist by training, but I'm now like a sort of an expert with Sinatrans and dolphins and manatees. So if you like something, just go for it.
Yeah. Or can go to Brazil, and become an intern with the, yes. Take some Portuguese, but we would welcome anyone coming. We do have a couple of internship programs.
Yeah, because I have a lot of questions, but it's not possible. So one of the questions I really like to ask is, you will know why I asked this question. You've highlighted biodiversity as a key element in the fight against climate change. Species such as small land mammals or native wildlife in our region within that large narrative? And what can we do to make their value more visible at both national and international levels? You know why I asked that question.
This opossum people. All these opossum people that I meet. Of course, land biodiversity also makes a difference, not only in the mitigation of climate change, but in the case of humans. We've been seeing that deforestation, for instance, unleashes different types of microorganisms, bacteria, whatever, that can end up becoming pandemics or human health issues. So to conserve the balance of terrestrial ecosystems is also very important. Now, we have an issue in that humankind has a problem in living together with wildlife. We're used to dogs and cats, but whenever any other animal comes close to us, we're horrified, usually, simply because we're not taught from a young age to live together with wildlife. And this is something that we need to learn to do. This is something that schools should be teaching. And this is something that must be also integrated into public policy. I launched the book a while ago about the importance of marine ecotourism, not only for generation of jobs and income, but also to get people closer to nature. And that has to happen also with terrestrial wildlife. Our research centers and rescue centers should be more open to the public. In general, we tell people, no, you can't come near these animals because we're treating them, and you can pass them diseases or something. That's not the case with most of the animals. We should take time to get children and youngsters to get to know and interact with wildlife. And in our case, that of people that work with rescue and education about opossums, that's a particular species that's good for that kind of stuff because they live among us. And if more and more people understand that wildlife is essential to our own well-being, then we can conserve them in their habitats. How do we do that? We need to put more wildlife in schools, not only the curricula, but also take children to get to interact with wildlife. And we need to make sure that our politicians understand that wildlife is an asset that's knocking at our door. It's not something that's out there in the forest or out there in the open ocean. Wildlife lives with us. We have to recognize that. We have to protect these animals and make sure that we have healthy interactions with them. I guess that's the way. That's what we've been trying to do for a while, as you know. Not easy, but that's the way to go, I guess. More interactions with wildlife, not less.
Do you have any other questions?
Let's see where the question. Oh yeah. How do you see the role of community-based? The word what I wanted to say, based on conservation in Suriname, evolving over the next decade, especially in engaging young people and bridging traditional knowledge with science.
Well, if it depends on me, it's going to become better, that co-management is going to be really, actually, it's going to become the standard and not the exception. And co-management means that the local communities are actually managing the resources that they live with, instead of us from the city coming in to tell them how to manage their resources. So I think that I see also that, for example, if you look at adaptation work, it's locally led adaptation that is getting funding. It is ecosystem-based adaptation that is getting funding. So I do think I have a positive idea about how this is going to evolve, because co-management and locally led actions, I think that is where the money is going to be, and I think our politicians will go also where the money is going to be put. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the very informative panel. We're going to take 5 minutes for bathroom and coffee, and we're back with Nathalie talking about mermaids and manatees. Okay? Thank you very much, everybody.